Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. All right, Giants fans, everybody who knows anything about the New York Giants knows that they need a quarterback. Whether they draft one at number 3, whether they go out and get one in free agency, whether they draft one on day 2, they have to get a quarterback. And one of the big names that everybody wants to discuss heading into the draft is, of course, Shedeur Sanders of Colorado. And here to give us some insight into Shedeur and that other really good player that Colorado has at the top of the draft is Scott Procter, Colorado Buffaloes reporter for the DNVR.com. Scott, thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you having me on, man. It's an exciting time. I know the season probably didn't go how Giants fans maybe wanted it to go, but you guys are in an enviable position here now that we head into draft season with the number 3 overall pick. And yeah, some really good choices there at the top of the draft for sure.
And before we get into those choices, Colorado's such an interesting program
It
with,
is.
with Deion Sanders, with all the attention that Colorado gets. What is it like just covering that program and being around it on a fairly consistent basis?
Yeah, it's a one of one opportunity, Ed. That's really the best way I can describe it, man. I've never been a part of something like this. Never been really up close and personal for an operation as extensive as this is in the forefront of social media in the sports world as Deion Sanders in the Colorado football program is. But it's been a blast, man. You were saying before the show that there's always something going on, with in the Giants kind of news cycle, and that is very much the same for Colorado. I mean, here this week, every day, damn near, it seems like there's a new Deion Sanders to NFL rumor or whatnot. So we kind of parse through that as we kind of get into the off season with, guys heading to the draft, the transfer portal, coaches, kind of moving around, being promoted, heading to other spots. So there's constantly something going around, but it's a blast, man. I always say I will never take for granted being able to watch this football team here in 2024, watching Shedeur Sanders every week, watching Travis Hunter and the things, unbelievable things he's able to do on the football field every week. I'll never taken it for granted. And it's been a blast, man. I'm excited for 2025 season for Colorado. Coach Prime being the head coach, obviously, and excited to see, a handful of these Colorado Buffs move on to the NFL and, make make waves at the next level. It's an exciting time for sure.
All right. I'm gonna put you on the spot. I know you're Scott
Yeah.
Proctor. I know you're a reporter covering Colorado, but I'm gonna turn you into Joe Shane. We're gonna put you on the spot right now.
Okay.
Number 3 pick in the draft. Somehow, some way, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter both fall to
Yeah.
number 3.
Mm. That's a good
Somehow,
spot to
some
be
way
in.
they somehow, some way. Now, I don't think this is gonna happen. I think
Right.
if
Neither do I.
but somehow, some way, they both sit there, and you're Joe Shane.
Mhm.
Which card do you turn in?
I'm going to sprint up to the podium to hand in Shedeur Sanders' draft card because Malik Neighbors is a star, right? As a rookie, I mean, he is a star, a future All Pro in my book. And you need somebody to get him the football on a consistent basis, in accurate fashion, and that's what Shedeur Sanders' calling card is. He is as accurate of a thrower of a football as I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. And we saw it time after again, not just in 2024, but in 2023, his first season at the Power Four level, even dating back to his time, at Jackson State. I mean, again, the amount of times that we saw this man throw better than 70% in terms of completion, 70% for his career, Ed. Over 4 seasons of college football, completing better than 70% of his passes. That is elite accuracy. And again, it doesn't come down just to accuracy, but it's about his high football IQ. He consistently knows where to go with the football. He's hardly ever fooled by coverages, and he's just what you want in a quarterback in terms of toughness. We all know that he was the most sacked quarterback in college football in 2023. Obviously, that number went down a little bit in 2024. And sure, he has something to do with a few of those sacks, right? Sacks are in some ways a quarterback stat, but he is one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen at avoiding sacks, evading defenders, extending plays, and again, not just extending plays to use his legs, but extending plays, keeping his eyes downfield to continue to create chunk plays in the passing game. Shedeur Sanders to me is obviously the best quarterback in this draft class, and uh, I have a lot of love for Cam Ward as well. I think he's going to be a really good pro at the next level as well. But Shedeur Sanders, again, he's the best quarterback in this draft. Travis Hunter is the best player in this draft, if you ask me. You can't go wrong with either of them. But for the Giants need a quarterback, a guy that they can, all build on, and also too, Shedeur Sanders has been in the limelight, spotlight since he was a kid, since he was a jit, So the spotlight of New York being with the Giants is not going to phase him one bit. That's where he needs to be. Him and Malik Neighbors will feed families for years to come for sure. I would love to see those two team up.
You said that's where he needs to be. You think that's the absolute right location? I know that there's a lot of chatter, and we'll get into some of that. There's a lot of chatter about Prime, wanting to not necessarily dictate Ishider's location,
Mhm.
but wanting to ensure that he doesn't land in the wrong place.
Right.
So you said that that's the right place for Shador, and is that because of New York City, the media, the market, because he can handle that, and because of the receiving weapon that's sitting there on the outside?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's multiple ways to look at it. I do believe that the Giants is a viable landing spot for Shedeur Sanders. I don't think the Giants would be a place that Deion Sanders would kind of maybe wave his son away from. I think it's partly because of the talent on the roster. There's not a ton of high end talent, but there's enough, at least at the skill positions, for a player like Shedeur Sanders to work with. We talk about Malik Neighbors. Tyrone Tracy is a really good young running back as well, who I think Shedeur would kind of benefit from, both in the run game and the pass game as well. And also, too, I think it has to do a lot with Brian Dable. I mean, I don't know how you feel about Brian Dable, Ed, or how kind of Giants fans at large feel about him. He's obviously kind of been dealt, a less than ideal card, particularly at the quarterback spot. But I'll never forget what he did in Buffalo, kind of really getting Josh Allen's career arc started on the trajectory that we're seeing it now. I'll never forget that. And I feel like he's done some work. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that you guys were able to win a playoff game on the road with Daniel Jones under center. So I believe in Brian Daboll as a head coach. And I feel like with the quarterback of Shador's stature and talent, that quarterback head coach combo of Brian Dable and Shedeur Sanders, I feel like can really make some noise. And the NFC in particular, right, that doesn't have all of the elite quarterbacks like the AFC does. So yeah, I think from an infrastructure perspective, talking about the head coach and obviously the talent perspective that Shedeur will be surrounded by, I do think the Giants is one of, if not the best potential landing spots for him.
And I apologize, folks. You guys hear my dogs barking there in the background, I'm sure. And that means my wife just walked in the house. So,
I didn't even hear him, man. You're good.
oh, you know what? You know what? They bark like crazy when my wife walks in the house. When I walk in the house, they walk up to the door, they look at me, and they go back to their beds and lay back down.
It's nothing like a mother's love, Ed. Nothing like a mother's love.
Not at all. All right, Scott, you mentioned Brian Daboll, and from the perspective of landing spot for Shador, one of the issues for a young quarterback is continuity, stability.
Mhm.
Um, Brian Dable will be heading into his fourth season. Joe Shane, as GM, will be heading into his fourth season. Giants are 9-25 the last 2 years. There's a reason they're number 3 in the draft.
Yeah.
There were questions about whether Brian Dable would be back in 2025. Would there be any hesitancy, you think, on the part of Shador, on the part of Prime, as a with New York as a landing spot. Just considering, we saw Caleb Williams go number one this
Mhm.
past year, and we saw his head coach get fired before the season was over. We
Yeah,
saw the same thing happen to to Bryce Young the year before. Go back a few years, and maybe the Giants should have, maybe they shouldn't have drafted Daniel Jones, but they put him through the ringer in terms of head coaches, offensive coordinators, GMs, over 5.5 years.
he did.
Any hesitancy about Brian Daboll maybe being on a hot seat entering 2025?
I don't think so, and I really don't think Shedeur is looking at it or thinking about it in that way. Like Shedeur is very confident in his abilities, and very rightfully so. I feel like he's thinking wherever he lands, he's going to be a success, and he's not expecting people after a year around him to be fired or be relieved of their duties. And I also think too, you know, Shador is so coachable, and I feel like that's something that gets overlooked when you talk about his bravado and kind of maybe his public image and perception. Him and Brian Dable are gonna, I feel like, really be able to gel and work well together. I mean, the way Pat Shurmur and Shedeur Sanders are able to kind of consistently collaborate and kind of work off each other and communicate really more than anything, I feel like is really telling of Shedeur Sanders' future and how he's going to be able to collaborate with coaches at the NFL level, potentially even Brian Dable. So I really don't think that that's going to be something on Shedeur's mind. And also, too, when you're as talented as he is and you're getting drafted in the top three, every team is going to have their warts. Every team is going to have their worries about, coaches potentially being fired a year or two down the line, GMs, front offices maybe being reshuffled. So there's no perfect scenario at any of these teams near the top of the draft, the Giants included. And I think Shedeur knows that. He accepts that. And he's just ready to play for a team that believes in him. And I think that's just kind of where we're at, which is a good place to be.
All right. When I look at Shedeur Sanders, and we're not talking about on the field right now, one of the things that people talk about is not only the talent that comes with Shedeur, but the other things that come with Shedeur. The fact that his father is such a presence, um, you know, s- which brings its own set of distractions or whatever you want to call it, issues. And I will admit that I'm one of those people who worries about that in terms of him coming to New York. Um, what I want people to do is I want people to talk me out of being worried about that. Um, so when you look at that, when you look at the other things that come with Shador, um, is that in your mind, or should that be an issue for anyone looking to draft him? Do they have to come to terms with who his father is and the fact that his father's going to have opinions, and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't envision that really being a problem. I'll be honest with you, Ed.
Mhm.
Coach Prime is going to be him, right? Occasionally, he's going to be in front of a mic, especially he's going to continue to coach, whether that be at Colorado or somewhere else. He's going to be at Colorado, but he's going to have a mic. He's going to have a voice. And whenever he says things, they're going to be pumped into social media, sports talk shows, and they're going to be talked about. That's just part of the game. But I don't ever think it will get to a point where it'll become a true distraction to what Shador's on-field product is. And you also have to remember too, you know, I don't know if there's a better way for a franchise quarterback to have been brought up, you know, the way Shador was being brought up literally in the limelight, being brought up, as the son of one of the best NFL players ever. Like, there's really nothing that's going to be able to phase him, surprise him, talking about Shador here. And I think that's the biggest thing, particularly in a big market like New York, where everything you do or say on the field, off the field, is going to be talked about. And also, too, it's another thing with Shador. Again, part of the reason or talking about kind of his upbringing, he doesn't do much of the extracurriculars. You're not going to see him out at clubs. You're not going to see him, participating in other things that don't have to do with being a better football player, being a franchise player, a face of a franchise. And I think those are things that you'll never have to worry about, that you might have to worry about with some of the other guys that you might take at the top of the draft in years past. So I feel like a lot of the noise, a lot of the uncertainty about Shedeur, the off-field product of Shedeur Sanders, a lot of it to me is just fabricated because I feel like, in you in particular, and if you ever really get to spend some time around Shedeur and just talk to him maybe in a one-on-one in a smaller setting, you'll realize that this kid is really not all how he's portrayed to be in the media, and that's very common amongst the stars in today's society. But Shedeur is really he's a football player, man. And he's a quarterback too. He's a leader of men. Everybody in those locker room, coaches, players alike, they all love him. They all adore him. They all have to play for him. And that to me is just what a franchise quarterback is all about. And that's what he is.
Let's talk about on the field. You talked a lot about his accuracy, about his anticipation, and those kinds of things. If you were if you're putting together a scouting report for the Giants for an NFL team, are there are there things to be concerned about with him? Some people talk about, oh, maybe he's not the plus plus athlete. Maybe he doesn't have the biggest, the Josh Allen kind of arm strength.
Mhm.
Um, are there things that you kind of have to work around with him at all, or worry about?
I really don't think so. I mean, you're right. I mean, he's not going to blow you away with his athleticism. He's certainly not in the Lamar Jackson mold, but I look at him, a very common comp to Shedeur Sanders has been Joe Burrow, right? And I see that a lot. I've consistently made the comp to Jared Goff, particularly the one that we've seen at his peak, right here recently in Detroit. Maybe in with the Rams when he led them to a Super Bowl, because he operates from the pocket more times than not, Shedeur Sanders, and he's elite at operating from the pocket. He can put the ball wherever he wants to with timing, with anticipation, with accuracy, allowing his receivers to make yards after the catch. And that's his superpower, his processor. Like I said earlier, he's almost never fooled by a defensive coverage, and that's big, particularly in the NFL when you're consistently seeing kind of pictures change, from pre-snap to post-snap. Shedeur is consistently, parsing through film to make sure he's prepared on game day, and that's huge. And also, he's great at situational football, right? At the end of halves, at the end of first halves, kind of go 2 for 1, score before the half, come out of the first half and score again. He's always awesome in those situations, late in football games, late in close games, down to score late in the game. I mean, I'm sure you remember maybe the Hail Mary game against Baylor. I'll never forget that night because that was a game that really, at late in that game, Colorado had no business winning. And Shedeur can makes plays with his arm late in the game. Obviously, completes the Hail Mary, goes on to win it in overtime. I mean, that's the stuff of legends right there. And again, particularly playing in a market like New York, playing in a division, with Jalen Hurts, with the Jaden Daniels, who had a spectacular, rookie season, and maybe even obviously Dak Prescott out there in Dallas. There's some really talented quarterbacks in your division. You're gonna need one if you're gonna want to compete. And Shedeur Sanders fits that build, to a T as well. So I feel like for me, Shedeur in the NFL, if you can protect him and you can put at least two above average weapons around him, he's going to be a really good pro.
All right, so let's talk about the other guy. Let's talk about Travis Hunter. Again,
Let's do
I see the smile on your face.
it.
I see it. Um, there's almost this impression that that if the Giants were to sit there at number 3, and let's say, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are off the board, there's almost this impression
Yeah.
that because of the need for the Giants at quarterback, there's almost this idea that, oh, Travis Hunter's the consolation prize. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to tell me that Travis Hunter is nobody's consolation prize if they land him at, wherever they take him in the draft. Just your thoughts on Travis Hunter.
I mean, if you take Travis Hunter, you're getting the best player in the draft. And that's why I said earlier in the show that Giants are in a very enviable position to sit at number 3 in the draft order because you can either get your quarterback of the future whether that be Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, or you can get literally the best player in the draft. And that's a hell of a way to start off a draft for, a franchise that needs to stockpile talent as much as it can. I mean, Travis Hunter to me is arguably the best receiver in this draft, and he's the best cornerback in this draft. I mean, we saw that time after time again. We can pull up some of the stats here, but some of the things that he did on the football field this year were things that we have quite literally never seen. We start on the offensive side of the ball at receiver, 21 receiving plays of 20 plus yards, the definition of a chunk play that led the nation. I mean, 7 100-yard receiving games, 5 multiple touchdown games. And then on defense, he's literally a receiver, locking down your best receiver. His ball skills are one of one. He can go up and locate the ball, both in contested situations and just going up to snatch it out of the air. I mean, it speaks for itself when you can put it like this. He won the Bednarik as the best receiver in college football. Excuse me. He won the Biletnikoff as the best receiver in college football this year. He won the Bednarik as the best defensive player in college football this year. And obviously capped it off with the Heisman Trophy in addition to, countless other hardware and, awards he won. But this is the best player in the draft. This is a generational talent. And again, for a situation, if he lands like in the Giants, I mean, a duel of Malik Neighbors and Travis Hunter at the receiver, no matter who's, even if I'm throwing the football, I'm going to feel pretty good about my chances with those two targets out of the throw to. And then on defense, again, he's going to shut down an entire side of the field. I mean, this is a lockdown corner, especially in a league that doesn't have a lot of them, right? You think of, Pastor Tan, here recently, who's really turned into an all-pro player, at that position. But that's somebody who I kind of compare him to at that cornerback spot. And if we're talking about comps on the other side of the ball, I see a lot of Justin Jefferson and Travis Hunter with his, just ability to get in and out of routes, his slipperiness, his ability to make guys miss, and again, catches literally everything. The first play that I ever watched live of Travis Hunter was week 1, his first target, his first catch of the season. He runs a 5-yard hitch, catches it, makes 3 guys miss, eliminates a safety's pursuit angle, and takes a 5-yard hitch, 60-plus yards for a touchdown. And at that point, I'm like, yeah, everything they said about this guy is true. And then he went on to do that for the next pretty much 3 months, every week. Again, it was every week he was doing something I had literally never seen before on the football field. And he's going to continue to do that at the NFL, no matter where he lands.
All right. So the Giants draft Travis Hunter. The common thing that you hear right now is that he's probably an every down full-time cornerback in the NFL and probably a guy who you use in packages on offense, maybe not every down, just because it's in this day and age, unheard of for a guy to play full-time on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that usage of Travis Hunter as a guy that, every down on defense and situationally on offense?
Got to be honest with you, Ed. I know Travis is going to want to play both ways full time in the NFL. I know he's going to want to do that. And I would allow him to do that until he shows me that he can't do it. I think it would be a mistake to have Travis Hunter on your team, use a top 3 pick on him, and not have him on the field every snap for you offensively. Because of what I just mentioned, he's a threat to take the ball to the end zone every single time he touches it. And for you to go through a series, 2 series, maybe a quarter, and Travis Hunter he's on your team and he doesn't touch the ball, that's a problem. And especially when I think about Brian Daboll, right, who is one of the best, in my opinion, coaches in the NFL, offensive-minded coaches, at getting their best players involved in different ways. I think Brian Daboll would be able to unlock some crazy things with Travis Hunter in terms of his usage, in terms of the ways that, you can kind of deploy him, in an offensive scheme. So if it were up to me, I would have him 100% both ways. And if I had to choose, he would be on my field every offensive snap and maybe give him a break defensively. But that all depends on kind of what the rest of the roster looks like, how he, kind of acclimates to the game. as you go through kind of fall camp, preseason, mini camp, and all that stuff. But I really think he's just an electric player offensively and obviously defensively as well. But in an offensive minded league, right, especially maybe if you don't have a quarterback, you're going to need to generate offense as much as you can. And Travis Hunter is going to help you do that.
How'd you like to be, in the room watching an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator fight over that?
Man, man, I couldn't. I mean, I saw a glimpse of it, this past year with, Pat Shurmur and first year defensive coordinator Robert Livingston. And, it wasn't really a fight is because he just does it so seamlessly. And it's so part of who Travis Hunter is as a football player. He doesn't like sitting on the sideline. He gets bored. You know what I'm saying? He
Mhm.
feels like he's not involved in the game. If there's live action out there on the field and he's sitting next to the coach on the sideline, he doesn't feel like he's being used the way he should be. And again, he has built his body, his physique up, his strength and conditioning up to a point where he can withstand playing damn near every snap of a football game. And I'm sure a lot of people are skeptical of whether he can do that at the next level. I'm not one of those people. I feel like if he goes to a spot, plays for a coach that allows him to do that, he's going to do it, and he's going to do it at a high level.
You worry about shortening his career at all, or you just let the chips fall?
I don't. I don't, man. Again, if there's a thing, maybe after you tested for a season, he consistently gets nicked up, then at that point you kind of reassess things 100% because you don't
Mhm,
want, like you said, you don't want to shorten the young man's career by any means. But at this point, particularly when you're still 21 years old,
mhm.
let him do it
Let him
because he
try.
can.
Let him
Let him
try.
try.
Let him
Facts.
try. Yeah, understood. Alright, I wanna ask you, couple more things. You mentioned it earlier in the show, and I actually saw that you wrote about it, on the website. The Deion Sanders to the Cowboys stuff.
Yep.
Is that just, uh, Jerry Jones smoke to get headlines?
If you're asking me, Ed, which you are, that's what I think this really comes down to. I think this really comes down to two longtime, really good friends kind of doing each other a solid, right? Was watching Monday Night Football, which I'm sure you were too, Ed.
Mhm.
Uh, Vikings Rams, wild card round, Monday Night Football. It's the playoffs, and at halftime of that football game, what were they talking about, Ed?
Mhm.
They're talking about
Deion
Deion
Sanders,
Sanders
the
and the
Dallas
Dallas
Cowboys.
Cowboys at
Mhm.
halftime of a playoff game that the Dallas Cowboys weren't playing in. The Dallas Cowboys didn't even make the playoffs. But and I think that's part of the plan. And also, too, Deion Sanders is in the midst of contract negotiations for an extension with the University of Colorado. Certainly, I would think that those public conversations maybe help him in those contract negotiations. And really, the bottom line here is that there's just too many obstacles in the way of Coach Prime leaving Colorado for the NFL in 2025, particularly for the Cowboys, right? Because the Raiders was the first rumor. It was reported by the Las Vegas Review Journal that Deion Sanders had interest in the Raiders job. The next day, it was reported by The Athletic that the Raiders do not have any interest in Deion Sanders for the head coaching job. So that kind of put that away. Then the Cowboys, kind of rumor mill started the next day. And what I'll say about that is Coach Prime has made it clear that the only way he would consider coaching the NFL is to coach his sons, plural, Shedeur and
Mhm.
Shiloh, right? And
Right.
obviously, really, it's more so about Shedeur because you're gonna need a top three pick pretty much to have him on your team in
Mhm.
2025. And obviously, the Dallas Cowboys just inked Dak Prescott to a 4-year, $240 million contract extension just a few months ago, just in September. That contract extension includes a no trade clause for Dak
Right.
Prescott, right? So
Right.
say he, waives his no trade clause. Say he's like, I don't want to get in the way of Deion Sanders coaching his son. I'm going to waive my no trade clause. There would still be $104 million cap hit if the Dallas Cowboys trade Dak Prescott before June 1, right? Then, so say both of those things get knocked out. Dak Prescott's now off your team. Now you have to trade from number 12 overall, where the Dallas Cowboys sit in the 2025 NFL draft, to trade up into a position to draft Shedeur Sanders. And
Mhm.
none of those teams in that top three New York Giants included, are going to make it easy for the Dallas Cowboys to do what everybody knows they're trading up to do, which is draft Shedeur Sanders. So, for all those reasons, I just think that there's too many obstacles in the way, but it makes for a compelling story. And that's really all that matters nowadays, right?
Yep. Of course, when you talk about the rumor mill, of course, what you're going to hear around the Giants for a year if they draft Shador is, oh, if Brian Daboll doesn't win enough games, they're gonna fire Daboll and bring in Prime to coach.
That is going to happen wherever. Yes, wherever Shedeur Sanders gets drafted, that rumor mill will continue, no doubt. That Deion Sanders is going to leave Colorado to coach his son wherever he ends up. That's just going to happen, no doubt.
Absolutely. You just have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Win games, keep your job if you're the head coach.
Period. It's simple.
All right. I want to ask you, Pat Shurmur, before we go, Pat Shurmur, former Giants head coach, former two-time NFL head coach. Pat Shurmur, I think, is a good guy. I think he's a good
Yeah.
offensive coordinator. I just don't know that he was ever really cut out to be a head coach. Just talk about the job that Shurmur has done at Colorado. Talk about um, if there are ways that he has helped Shador in particular.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting situation, right? Because Pat Shurmur was on staff at Colorado last year, kind of as an offensive analyst, and halfway through the year, when Sean Lewis was demoted, and eventually took over the head coaching spot at San Diego State. Pat Shurmur kind of took over halfway through the season, last year, kind of still running Sean Lewis's offense. And obviously that didn't really go too well for the second half of the 2023 season for the Colorado Buffaloes. But in 2024, he had a full off season to kind of install what he wanted to run and what he wanted to do. And the results, you can't really argue with, right? This is one of the most explosive offenses in college football in 2024. Obviously, we're talking about Shedeur Sanders is, the top quarterback in the 2025 NFL draft. And it helps when you have an elite quarterback and a Heisman Trophy on your team and three or four other elite receivers. But I feel like Pat Shurmur kind of did a really good job of kind of stabilizing this offensive unit after what was a really rocky year in 2023. And again, it's not easy, kind of coaching the son of your boss, right? I really couldn't imagine that, but it seems like again, Coach Prime has talked about this multiple times. The communication part between Coach Shurmur and Shedeur was consistently on point. They were able to talk things out, whether that be on the sideline during the game or obviously in meeting rooms throughout the week. And I feel like their collaboration was a big reason why, Shedeur, kind of went from a question mark, so to speak, maybe after last season to undoubtedly the best quarterback in the 2025 NFL draft. And Sherman deserves a lot of credit for that, or at least a decent amount. And I'm excited to see kind of him here in 2025 with the transfer quarterback and a true freshman five-star quarterback kind of battling it out to be QB1 for the Bucks in 2025.
All right, Scott. Hey, I think that's a good place for us to wrap it up. Appreciate your time and all of your insight. Just let folks know, with all the interest in Shadur and Travis. Let folks know where they can find your work, on the website and maybe on social as well.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you having me on, man. You all can follow, all of my work and all the latest things happening with Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes football program. At my Twitter, now known as X at Scott Procter with an underscore at the end. And also you can follow all my written work at thednvr.com. Appreciate you as always, Ed, man. It's an exciting time, man. I'm really, really fascinated to see how this draft season unfolds and, what the Giants ultimately do with that
A-
number
a-
three.
As am I, and we will see. There's a pretty solid possibility one of those guys is wearing a
Yeah,
Giants uniform this spring. So maybe we'll have to circle back and talk about that as that unfolds.
might have
So
to do that. Let me know.
appreciate the time, Giants fans. Thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.